commentators to see if anybody says anything.
30th of May, Rabbi Levitt, Ezra.
Okay, well, none of the commentators tells us over here. Our scroll didn't tell us either. So we'll leave it at that. So, fine. So that's what they did. They took from the daughters of Barzillai of Gilad. Fine. We'll go to the next pasuk. Pasuk Samach Beis. And we go to Roy to continue the reading.
אלה ביקשו בסובום המשייחים ולא נמסרו ויבוא עלו מן הכהונה. They took the wives of the daughters, took to wife of the daughters of Barzillai, the Gileadite, and was called by their name. These who traced their genealogy sought their records, but they were not found, and they were disqualified the priesthood. All right. They were disqualified from the priesthood, I suppose it says. Oh yes, from the priesthood. Because that was, yeah. So it's important for a Kohen to know who's who.
Okay, so you have any more about that? We have an awful lot over here. Now we're going to start to explain who this Barzillai was.
Okay. So you take it because I haven't got that much.
So
61.
So the pasuk says they sought their records of yichus, their who their father was, who their father's father was, v'chule, and they couldn't produce such records. So accordingly, they were taken down from the priesthood. So what exactly happened over there?
So they were married first. Was that right? They were married first, and then it was found that they couldn't find the documents.
Oh, that's an interesting question you have. At what point was it that they couldn't find their records and they were disqualified? We'll keep that in mind.
Mm-hmm.
We'll see what it says over here. This is based upon a Gemara in Kedushin. The search, in other words, what was this? If you'll ask, well, is it true that every Cohen that comes and says he's a Cohen, we say, oh, where's your genealogical records? And if they don't have any, we throw them down. So here, they say that, I don't know if there's any, maybe there's some Kohanim today that have that can produce genealogical records, but we don't, I don't believe that we,
I'm still not feeling 100%.
Lou?
A little bit. I got to sleep. I did not get your email.
Okay, I muted Lou. So what's going on over here, basically? So they say like this in the note. The search was required because Kohanim were forbidden to marry a woman who was not born a Jewess. Right? That was the issue. The issue was not that they were not Kohanim. The issue was, who did they marry? Kohanim are forbidden to marry a woman who is a Gioris, a proselyte, or even one who's descended from proselytes, unless one of her ancestors was of original Jewish lineage. Okay, so that's a bit complicated. We're not going to get into the details of that, but that's what we said over here. And then to add on to that, a child born of such a marriage is disqualified from the kahuna, because because the Cohen he wasn't supposed to marry that woman that he married. So his son is not a Cohen. So who was this Barzillai? So they say Barzillai, he was a ger. So that's who he was. And question is, what about his wife? We don't really care so much about him, I don't think, but the issue is about his wife. Who is his wife? So they say his wife's origins were not known. So we don't know whether the wife was born a Jewess or whether she was also like him, a Gioris. So we have to be concerned for the possibility that she was. And accordingly, the Kohen would not be able to marry the daughter of a proselyte and his wife, who was also a proselyte. So therefore, the Kohanim, the pasuk says that they married the daughters of Barzillai, and so they were suspected of having violated this Isser that a Kohen has to marry a person, marry a wife who was not born a Jewess. And even if it goes into the previous generation. So therefore it became necessary for those descendants, the children of Barzillai, to produce records certifying that Barzillai's daughters were not descended from converts. So there was no issue about the Kohanim themselves. The issue was what about the what was the yichus of the wives of these Kohanim?
It says here the daughters of Barzillai the Gileadite, called by their name in 61.
Yeah, he was called Barzillai Hagiladi. Sounds like he was a famous person. Gilad is a region in I think it's Ever Yarden, on the other side of the Jordan, from Shevet Reuben or Shevet Gad. But Malbim continues that the doubt concerning the children of Barzillai arose from the fact that besides the family of Kohanim known as the children of Barzillai, there was also an Israelite clan known by the same name. There was a very famous, so he's saying the children of Barzillai were now presented themselves as Kohanim, had believed mistakenly that they were members of the Israelite Barzillais, and had in consequence married women forbidden to Kohanim. So we're not saying that anybody did anything intentionally wrong. They just weren't. In fact, there was a famous Barzillai, who I assume was a Jew. He was he did a great favor for David HaMelech that we learned about in he gave great assistance to David HaMelech when he was in flight from his from Shaul HaMelech, and David HaMelech had him at his table, and they gave him great honor, and in because he had a lot of hakaras hatov to him. I'm assuming that Barzillai was from the was a proper Israel. So these people, they knew that they were Bnei Barzillai, but they thought that they were from Barzillai, who was of Jewish ancestry. So accordingly, they didn't see any issue with marrying someone who was a Cohen, and I guess the Cohen also didn't realize. But I guess somebody raised the issue at some point, and then there was a investigation that was done about who exactly were these Bnei Barzillai. Thus, it was also necessary for the children of Barzillai to prove that their ancestors had adhered to the special marriage restrictions that applied to the Kohanim. Okay. Anyway, so the pasuk records that they were demanded to produce proof of their genealogy, and but lo nimsa'u, they could not be found. You weren't able to find the records, so they didn't know one way or another. Maybe they were okay, maybe they were not okay. So what should we do in a case like that? We don't know. So in that case, by Goalu, they were disqualified. They have to be able to prove that their genealogy is 100% without any doubts or suspicions about who they were. So since they couldn't do that, they were taken down. Now, what does it mean they couldn't? They were taken down from being Kohanim. What does that entail? So Rashi says that they obviously were not able to do the avoda in the Beis Hamikdash.
Were they demoted to Leviim?
No, they're not. They don't become Levim are not Kohanim that are puzzle. They're just not. They're not Kohanim. So they couldn't do any avoda that only a Kohen is allowed to do in Beis Hamikdash. But he raises a question about their permissibility to receive truma. That seems like that it wasn't so clear that they were not allowed to receive truma. So we'll see that in the next pasuk. Okay, Lou, pasuk samach gimel. Oh, Lou, I'm sorry, I muted you.
Sorry about that. I didn't see that. Okay. Vayomer Hatir Shasa lahem asher lo yochlu mikodesh hakadashim ad amod kohen leurim ulesumim. Let's see. So Hatir Shasa told them that they should not eat of the most holy offerings until there would arise a Kohen to inquire of the Urim and the Tumim. So let's see the commentary. Hatir Shasa, Rashi identifies Hatir Shasa as Nehemiah. Nehemiah, who is Hatir Shasa, I guess that's what it says in Nehemiah 8:9. Rashi also cites the rabbinic analysis of the name Hatir Shasa. He permitted Shato to drink. Nehemiah was granted permission to drink wine that had been touched by a heathen. Although the sages prohibited the drinking of such wine, see Rambam and Machalos Asuros, they removed the restriction in the extraordinary circumstance of Nehemiah, whose office as royal butler to Darius required that he taste the wine prior to placing it before the king. Reb Yeshaya Mitrani states that permission was granted because of the danger to Nehemiah's life should he have refused the king's order to drink. Although even biblical prohibitions may be transgressed to save a life, a special dispensation was needed to allow Nehemiah to take the office and place himself in a position where he would be forced to drink the wine. This permission was granted to him so that he would work for the welfare of his people. Alternatively, Ibn Ezra suggests that he was a Chaldean, that Hatirasha was a Chaldean title conferred upon men of great power and influence, similar to a satrap. Of the most holy offerings, the disqualified Kohanim were forbidden to eat the Kohen's portion of the offering. Rashi. The inference is that only the sacrificial portions were forbidden to them, but not the truma, produce portion given to the Kohen, levied on the produce of the land. Rashi's interpretation follows the Talmudic opinion, Kedushin, that Hatirasha disqualified these Kohanim only from eating the sacrificial portions, but permitted them to partake of Truma. Rashi over there explains that, according to his view, the Holy of Holies refers to the sacrificial portions because they are most holy food taken from the holy offerings. The term most holy, however, is inapplicable to Truma. Although this levy is itself holy, it is taken from the crops harvested by the farmers for their own personal use. Thus, it is not most holy. Although both the sacrificial portions of Truma may not be consumed by non-Kohanim, i.e. Levites, Israelites, and disqualified Kohanim, according to Kedushin, a distinction was made between the two. The basis for this distinction, the Talmud reasons, is the legal principle of chazaka, maintenance of the status quo in cases of doubt. See Chulin. According to this principle, when a certain halachic Torah law situation remains unresolved, the original legal status prevails, i.e., no previous practices are abrogated and no innovations are introduced. In the case of the agricultural tithes, these questionable Kohanim had eaten them through the Babylonian exile. Although produce grown outside the land of Israel is biblically exempt from the tithe, rabbinic legislation made such tithing obligatory in Babylonia. See Rambam Trumos. When the return to the land prompted investigations which cast doubt upon the ancestry of some Kohanim, and that uncertainty could not be resolved, the decision was rendered in accordance with the principle of chazaka. The previous practice concerning truma would prevail. All these Kohanim could continue eating this tithe as they had done before the subject of their legitimacy was raised. However, the sacrificial portion now being reinstated would be forbidden to those of doubtful ancestry, since this was an innovation, offerings not having been brought during the exile years when there was no temple. See Kedushin. A different Talmudic interpretation states that the questionable Kohanim were forbidden from partaking even from Truma. However, this prohibition applied only to biblically required Truma. They were permitted to continue eating Truma made obligatory by rabbinic decree. The biblical requirement to give Truma from produce applies only to produce grown in Eretz Yisrael. The rabbis at the time of the exile and in the early years of the Second Temple decreed that this requirement be extended first to Babylonia because it was a center of Jewish activity relatively close to Israel, and then to the lands immediately bordering on Israel, Ammon, Moab, and Egypt. See Rambam to Trumos. The biblical requirement is further limited according to some opinions. Rashi to Kedushin, to grains, wine, i.e. grapes, and olive oil, while the Truma requirement for other fruits is only rabbinic. Others disagree. Rambam Trumos and Kesef Mishnah there. Truma from vegetables, according to all opinions, is only rabbinic. Accordingly, Hatasatha's restriction was directed against the eating of both sacrificial portions and biblical truma. There's a question, however, whether any biblical requirement for truma existed during the period of the Second Temple. Based on a dispute recorded in the Talmud, Yevamos, Rambam to Trumos, rules that even in Eretz Yisrael, the biblical requirement applies only when all, or at least most, of Israel lives there. That situation never existed during the period of the Second Temple.
Wow.
I thought it did. I thought more people stayed.
Well, this is one of the main themes of Sefer Ezra, that we see what a small portion of Klal Yisrael actually went up to live in Eretz Yisrael. But I thought that was initially when the permission was granted, and the people were able to go there. They weren't able to go there, before the time of very difficult. At any rate, before the time of Ezra. But Ezra led a an aliyah, I guess you could say, to Eretz Israel. But we're going to see from the psukim that a very small percentage of Klal Yisrael came up, actually. But I thought that in the course of time, you got, the base of Mikdash is going to be built, and the korbanos are going to be brought, and eventually Jews came up from Bavel, where they were. Overwhelming majority of them was in Bavel in Babylonia to up to Eretz Yisrael. But okay, so they're saying over here that throughout they're saying that this situation never existed during the period of the Second Temple. I'm wondering if that's agreed to by all opinions. I'm not sure whether that is so.
I wonder how that relates to today. I think that we're getting to the point where there's going to be a majority of Jews in Israel today. Is that going to change something?
Well, according to the Rambam, that's the only time where we have a biblical obligation of truma. So you need, in other words, the produce of Eretz Yisrael, number one, and you also need that the majority of the Jewish people are in Eretz Yisrael in order for the mitzvah of truma to be midaraisa from the Torah. Also has implications as far as Yovel is concerned. The 50th year after the 49 years of 7 cycles of Shemitah, you have a Yovel, and that also the pasuk also makes a similar requirement that for the Yovel to be incumbent upon Klal Yisrael. So that would be like a second year, right after the 49th year of Shemitah, you'll have a 50th year of Yovel, which would be also like 2 years of not tilling the soil and producing. That would also only be if Rov Yisrael was in Eretz Yisrael.
Does it require everybody to be observant, or doesn't it matter?
I don't think it matters.
Interesting. So we may have a big upheaval coming up soon.
Yeah. The first thing they'll have to figure out is, when is the 50th year? They're going to have to make a record all the way back to the time of Adam Arishon and figure out. I think the Rambam makes a calculation. Which year is the Yovel year?
Right.
But we're so that would bring us all the way to the time of the Rambam. So from there, we got almost 1,000 years to figure it out, though. But okay, yeah, we could do it.
Wow. Okay. Accordingly, the question of whether the doubtful Kohanim were allowed to eat biblical truma or only rabbinic truma would seem to have been essentially an academic one. Nehemiah, anticipating the eventual return of all Jews to Israel, and hence the restoration of the biblical requirement of truma, may have disqualified these questionable Kohanim from eating the biblical truma. In practice, however, the question was moot because the conditions for restoring the biblical requirement for truma were never met. Ravad and others dispute the ruling and assert that there was a biblical requirement for truma during the period of the Second Temple, even though most Jews did not live in Israel. Accordingly, this question has practical significance.
Oh.
See the Vilna Gaon to Eurydeia.
So it's coming out. There's a big fat machlokes between the Levitt and the Rambam about whether Truma is deraisa based upon Rov Yisrael in Eretz Yisrael. According to the Ravid, it doesn't make any difference. There's a biblical requirement for produce in Eretz Yisrael, regardless of how many Jews are living in Eretz Yisrael.
Right. So according to that view, we should be having Truma now and Yovel now.
Well, no, Yovel doesn't go together with Truma.
Oh,
Yovel is a pasuk. Nobody argues on that.
so for Yovel, you have to have a majority.
Yeah. Yeah, the Gemara, it's already a Gemara over here. It's probably over here in Kedushin. It's discussing this with Yovel. There's they darshan a pasuk, so that's there won't be a machlekes between the Ravid and the Rambam in regard to Yovel.
Okay, a Kohen to inquire of the Urim and the Tumim. The Urim and the Tumim was a parchment bearing the ineffable name of Hashem that was inserted into the Choshen Mishpat, the breastplate, worn by the Kohen Gadol. When he requested divine instruction, certain letters of the names of the 12 tribes inscribed on the breastplate would light up, spelling out the prophetic message. Rashi to Exodus. This is Rashi's opinion and is accepted by Ramban. It also, who adds that it was written by Moshe in a manner entrusted by Hashem to him alone.
Wow.
Ritva to Yoma says that it was divinely written and given to Moshe.
Wow. Amazing.
I've got here that with the phrase "until a priest arises," it's like a person who says to his friend, "Until the Mashiach comes, this matter will not come about." I cannot interpret it to mean "until a priest arises" for the Urim and Tumim in the second temple, because we find in Yoma chapter 1, 21b, that the Urim and Tumim were missing in the second temple, says Rashi.
Yeah, we're going to get to that right now.
Right, I was ahead. I'm sorry.
Rambam, according to Kli Hamakdash and Beis Habechira, seems to be of the opinion that it was the breastplate itself. See Kesef Mishnah. His son, Rav Avraham, in his commentary to Shmos, feels that the Urim and the Tumim was the general name of the precious stones affixed to the breastplate. Mishnah Yoma. The Kohen of the Urim and the Tumim is therefore the Kohen Gadol, high priest, who could elicit through the Urim and the Tumim the divine revelation necessary to clarify the standing of these doubtful Kohani, Rabag and Mitsudos. Rashi, citing Sota, states that this phrase refers to the Messianic era, since the Urim and the Tumim had disappeared during the destruction of the first temple and was never restored in the second temple. The reference, therefore, is not to any Kohen of the second temple, but to the Kohen Gadol, who will arise during the Messianic era, when the final temple will be constructed and the Urim and Tumim will be restored. Does that mean they'll be found?
Good question.
I
would assume so.
Yeah.
because we need the Urim V'Turim that was written by Moshe, or according to the Ritva, was divinely written.
Right. So I guess a question would be, if it was written by Moshe, does that mean it could be written again by somebody else? Mashiach, maybe?
Oh, maybe. We'll find out.
Amen. Until that time, Hatirshatha informed these Kohanim the doubts regarding the legitimacy would persist. The Talmud in Yoma lists the Urim and the Tumim among the 5 things that were present in the first temple, but not the second temple. This needs clarification in light of what we know about the Urim and the Tumim. See the previous comment. According to Rambam, who understands the Urim and the Tumim to be the breastplate itself, or according to Rav Avraham, the precious stones on it, the Urim and Tumim was itself one of the vestments that the Kohen Gadol was required to wear. Thus, it could not have been absent during the second temple. For without the breastplate and its stones, the Kohen Gadol would be mechusar begadim, lacking vestments, and hence unfit to perform the service. See Mishnah Zvachim, Gemara. Rambam, sensing this difficulty, says, according to Kli Hamikdash, they made an Urim and Tumim during the second temple in order to complete the total of 8 vestments, though they did not inquire of them. Why did they not inquire of them? Because there was no sacred spirit, i.e. no prophecy, more in the Nevuchim. And any Kohen who does not speak with the sacred spirit, and upon whom the divine presence does not rest, is not inquired of. As Rev Avraham explains this view, the Urim and the Tumim itself did exist in the second temple. It was only its prophetic power that was lacking. Thus, the meaning of our verse is, until a Kohen would arise fit to inquire of the Urim and the Tumim, i.e. its prophetic power. According to Rashi, only the parchment with the divine name written on it was missing during the second temple. Thus, the Kohen Gadol was not lacking in garments, since the Urim and Tumim was not a garment, but something inserted into a garment. According to this school of thought, there was not an Urim and Tumim during the second temple.
Now, why was there not an Urim and Tumim during the second?
Why was there not an Urim and Tumim during the second temple?
In other words, because the Talmud says that the Urim and Tumim was one of the 5 things that were present in the first temple, but was not present in the second temple. So something wasn't there. The question is, what is the Urim and Tumim referring to? That'll explain what it was that wasn't there in the second temple. There's difference of opinions on this matter. That's what all this long notice is dealing with.
Right. Abarbanel to Shmos says that when King Yoshia hid the ark, see Yoma, he also hid Moshe's Urim and Tumim. This is best understood according to Ritva above, who asserts that the Urim and Tumim was given to Moshe by Hashem. Hence, it was irreplaceable. According to Rambam's view that Moshe wrote the divine name in the Urim and the Tumim, it was replaceable. But since Moshe received secret instructions on how to write the divine name, it could not be duplicated. Although Ramban states that Moshe revealed this secret to the greatest of the Jewish sages, to whom he transmitted the mysteries of the Torah, it may be that with the passage of time the secret was lost and the Urim and the Tumim could no longer be replaced. Reb Yeshaya Mitrani identifies the Kohen of the Urim and the Tumim as the escort of the Messiah. The prophet Elijah, the prophet Elijah. Malbim, however, feels that the passage may be understood in relation to the Kohen Gadol of the Second Temple, contending that although the Urim and the Tumim was never actually reinstated, it would have been restored had the nation been found worthy. Thus, during the early period of the return from Babylonia, when Hatish'atha made his statement to the Kohanim, the people still hoped that the Kohen of the Urim and the Tumim would arise in their times. That was a long commentary.
Yes, it was.
Oh boy.
Thank
Wow.
you. Bye. Have a good Shabbos.
Okay, good
All right.
Shabbos, everybody.
Shabbos. Good Shabbos.
All the best.
All right. Be well, everybody. Good Shabbos.